Well, hey, everybody. I'm Keith Ferrin, and I'm guessing since I probably sent you the link, you know that. My friend Sarah Beckman is with me today, and she's the author of a brand new book that technically comes out next Tuesday called Alongside. And it's right there. There's a copy
Woohoo!
she sent me. So, welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Keith. Glad to be here.
Yeah. And for just kind of a little kind of orienting people to the room and how this is going to work. What we're going to do is we are going to talk through some very practical guidelines for helping your neighbor in times of struggle. What do you do when somebody's facing cancer or the death of a loved one or job loss or something more than just I have a bad cold. and and I want to hear a little bit about Sarah's story, but also on the side there, you'll see the chat room where you can actually post, questions. If you've got questions, if you just want to say hi, you can actually type. I'd love to make sure that you're being able to see this and hear this. I know there are a bunch of people I'm seeing. I'm going to see stats on who's in the room, and there are a bunch of people here. If you want to let me know where you're from and that, but then also where you type your message, you can actually click that little bubble that looks like a talking sign, and it will change to a green and white kind of Q&A. So if you have a question for Sarah or for me, I'm going to let Sarah do most of the talking after this, but then you can just change that to question, and it'll pop up and let me know that a question is being asked, and that would be, and so we're going to cover kind of these 5 guidelines at the beginning, and then stay on for a little bit longer and answer specific questions that people have. So sometimes I'll interject a question right in the middle, and sometimes I will just kind of hold those questions for the end and be able to do those. So anyhow, so I see people in Illinois and Tennessee, and so thanks for joining us. So Sarah, let's jump in, and before we get into the guidelines themselves, tell us briefly kind of what was the experience? I know you've told me the long version of the story, but what got you to the point where you even felt like you could or wanted to or needed to write this book?
Yeah, great question. Welcome, everyone. Look at that. Washington, Tennessee, Illinois. So great. My journey really was one where I was a young mom and had 2 babies, and I went on bed rest with my 3rd child. And so I was on bed rest for 11 weeks, and people rallied around us and really had a lot of amazing help, most of which from our church community. And we were sort of new believers, if you will, at that time. And so it really spurred on our faith to watch these people loving our family. And then in that same short period of time, I started to have back problems, and I ended up having 4 back surgeries in 6 years. And simultaneously, as I grew in my faith, I was watching other people struggling in their life, and I was feeling this call to reach out and help them the way I had been helped and served. And so I had 3 really close family and friends that walked through terminal illness in 3 years. And some of that was sort of at the end of my back surgery journey, and some of it was in the middle of my back surgery journey. So 2 really good friends and 1 family member that died of terminal cancer. And so in that decade, so to speak, I both received a lot of help and offered help, and got really intimate and up close and realizing what was helpful and what was not so helpful. And I really tried to write the book from the perspective of being that person that was the outsider watching other families go through it. And even though I was offering help, I was really had a bird's eye view for all of this help that was being offered, and things that sort of were wonderful and things that weren't so great that were happening. And then all of a sudden people started to turn to me for advice. And that was the light bulb moment when people realized I had been through so much myself and walked with others. They were asking me questions, and I thought, I think that maybe more people would be good at this if they just had the right tools. And so that was sort of how the book was born.
Yeah. And I love, as I read both an early copy and then got a hold of this copy as well, just how practical it is, because we've all had that experience of somebody's going through a super hard time. Sometimes we know them very, very well. Sometimes they're just somebody who happens to live on our street, and we know that somebody passed in their family, and in so many of these situations, we end up feeling the sense of paralysis of, I don't want to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing or do nothing, but I end up postponing it until it feels awkward to do something, and then you do nothing, and then you feel guilty, and this whole thing. And you write about a concept, this kind of relationship tiers that I think is kind of one of those, oh well, of course, but we never think of it. So can you unpack that a little bit? How do we overcome that paralysis, and what do you mean in your book by relationship tiers?
Yeah, so what I figured out was that there was times in our life that we were called to be a little bit deeper involved in certain relationships. And this was something I wrestled with, that whole process of researching and interviewing people for the book and creating the chapters and what was going to go in it. And it all of a sudden it occurred to me that there is a time and a place where we have a deeper role, and that if we stepped up when we know that it's really our place to help, as opposed to feeling like we should help everyone and then we help no one because that's unattainable. So the relationship tiers are, I think, permission giving and very freedom giving, in that if someone is a very close relationship, there's different ways and different levels of help that we should offer. So if you're a relationship one, that's, you're very close, you're a family member, you're a best friend, you're right in that inner circle. And what I call tier 4 would be someone who you just know. Maybe Keith tells me that this girl he knows from church has cancer, and he's praying for her and walking alongside her, but I don't know her. I've never met her. So that's like a tier 4. But if my heart feels called because of the compassion Keith has, then I can then reach out with maybe just a card. I'm praying for you. You don't know me, but I'm with you in prayer. That's a perfect expression for a tier 4 if I'm feeling led. But what happens is we get stuck in this place of thinking that we have to help everyone, and we don't assess how close we are. Is it really our place? And when we realize that maybe we're more called to be deeper helpers, or on more of a intimate level in some ways, or more often, I would say it would be tier 1 or 2. And tier 2 is just really a next grade friend. It's maybe someone that you see a lot at soccer or those types of places, but yet, they're not really someone you hang out with on the weekends, but you see them once a week. And so you feel like, I got to do something, but they're not like your tier 1. Then there's different ways to help. So throughout the whole book, I give you permission to really go deeper and reach more to those tier 1s and 2s. And I offer different expressions of concern or care or support in the tier 3 and 4 situations. But when we can let some of the 2s even, and the 3s and the 4s go off our radar because we know they have other tier 1 people in their life, then we're more likely to help where we're really called to those people that really need us, that we're very close to, and be even a deeper, better support.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. So speaking of what to do, and that there are different things to do at different times, and at different levels. One thing that is the most common thing that people do, and you say never do or never say, is never say, what can I do to help? Or how can I help? And yeah, that's kind of the natural response. Let me know if I can do anything. Yes. What can I do to help? How can I help? So why should you never say that? And what should you do instead?
Yeah, the most common thing we hear is, let me know what I can do. And while the offer is really well intended, it's very hard for the receiver, the person in trial, to actually take you up on it. And the reason is that they might be sitting there wondering, how do I find the right thing for you to help with? What would be the right thing to ask that person that said 17 times, let me know what I can do? But I also heard from people that said, sadly, that when people repeatedly said, let me know what I can do, let me know what I can do, let me know what I can do, they said there's this huge burden on them to find something for that person to do. And gosh, do we want to add even 1 ounce of burden more No, we do not want to do that. We don't want to make anything harder than it already is in their life. So it's very hard for them to take us up on it, and it puts a lot of burden on them to find the right thing or to ask. Now, maybe you're a sister and you're a tier 1 and you've said, let me know what I can do. And your sister's going to say, yes, I need you to call 75 people and, do this and that. But anyone outside of someone very, very close is going to have a hard time. They're going to have a hard time taking you up on your offer. So then no help ever gets given. So I would recommend the combat for that is making a specific offer. And when we make a specific offer, as in, I would love to bring you a meal. What day is good? Then it's very hard, number one, for them to say no, because it's put into a perfect little place that they, oh gosh, she wants to do that, right? Or if they just don't need it, then it's a simple no. You know what? We're good. We just really don't need any meals. And then you may offer another specific thing later if you want to keep offering. But ultimately, it's easier to receive when it's specific. I had a friend once that did this to me, and I laughed because afterwards she said, I used your book on you. I thought, oh, you got me. And she said, I was on my way to your house and I wanted to bring you coffee, but I thought if I asked if you wanted coffee, you would just say no because you thought you'd be putting me out. And so she specifically said, I'm going to Starbucks. What is your order? And I thought, wow, she's already going, and how thoughtful. And I sure wouldn't want to make her feel bad by not taking her up on it. And so these specific offers make it so much easier for the person facing trial to receive, first of all, which is a whole nother conversation about how difficult it is to receive. But specific offers combat that ability to receive because it's laid out in a way that it's harder to say no to. And it's sort of a black and white yes or no. And there's one other really important nuance to this, Keith, that I just really love to point out, which is when I make a specific offer, I'm very likely able to actually produce the thing I've offered. As in, I wouldn't offer to bring you a home-cooked meal if I didn't cook.
Right.
I wouldn't offer to drive your kids if I didn't have a car, right? So what if you say, let me know what I can do, and they say, gosh, I could really use a meal. And you are like, that is not in my wheelhouse. Oh no. So then it's all of a sudden this sort of awkward, you have to perform something that you didn't really have the skill set to perform. So specific offers just combat that on every level. I mean, it's just a home run. When you say, I can do this, would that be helpful? Do you need it? They can say yes or no, and it's so much easier to receive.
Right. Yeah. So helpful. And I mean, with guideline 1 being kind of recognizing your relationship tiers, and guideline 2 really being the specific offers when it comes to doing, you also, on that same vein, the third guideline really has to do with the listening piece. And so since a lot of us are tempted to be doers, then I think that second guideline of specific offers for those who are, that's just how they're wired, is I want to do something, is going to be really, really helpful. But with many of us so tempted to be doers, what's something else we can do that's even sometimes more important? And when we're listening, what's that one thing you mentioned to me in a conversation? What's that one thing that so often happens when we're listening?
Yeah.
That's again well-intentioned but not helpful.
Yeah.
So
there's so many elements of listening, right? We think, oh, all I have to do is listen, but really there's a specific way to listen. And oftentimes, and this might be a, pink and blue kind of thing, a guy and girl situation, but I also just think that, sometimes guys want to fix, and maybe girls are a little better at that sort of compassionate listening. But even I think, with women, moms talking to each other, we want to just jump right in and fix things for our friend. And so I think that we need to listen and not try to fix the problem. And really, when you've had someone that's listened to you really well in your life, haven't you just considered it the greatest blessing, Keith?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It just, there's nothing like someone that just unadulterated listener. And really, I believe that more of us can do this than we think, because it's not just the gifted people that are great listeners. We can all learn this. I am a talker by birth.
Yeah.
And I don't really thrive in listening, but I've worked so hard at this because it is really a valuable thing. And we think of listening as doing nothing. because we want to be doing the meal and driving the kids and, cleaning the house and doing the laundry or, whatever, driving to chemo or any number of tasks that we can do that are more doing oriented. But what happens is that we miss this sort of opportunity to use listening as a form of doing. It really is a valuable thing we can do. So the temptation is to listen for a little bit and then chime in and want to fix. But that's not helpful in almost every situation. It's not helpful to offer a fix because it undermines sort of their current situation and makes them feel like, I just, really wanted someone to hear me. And I want to be known about this. I want to have someone take sort of part of this burden. And listening is a way to sort of receive that burden that person is carrying, which is so heavy. And the minute we fix it, we sort of shift the focus on, oh, I'm not really just receiving that burden anymore. I'm now trying to put my own spin on it, so to speak. The other question you asked was about sort of what's the worst thing we can do. Another thing that we tend to do besides try to fix is we compare.
Right.
And so we're listening to someone's story and we see a similarity and we think, oh, if I chime in with how I feel this is similar to something I experienced, I'm offering empathy. I mean, that is a common thought. It's not malintentioned in any way. We want to resonate. We want to empathize. But the minute we say, I had this, or I know this, or then we have immediately hijacked their story, their problem, their trial, their struggle, and we have turned it back to us. We've made it about us. And so I call it comparative, listen, don't compare. And I think what happens is we might do comparative storytelling. Here's my terrible story. Comparative grief. Oh, my sister's dog's hamster. There's people that take that to such a level that it doesn't even resonate with the person anymore because it isn't actually similar. So there's this slippery slope when we open our mouth and start to compare our grief or our story with someone else's. And it really just takes the focus off of them. And then we aren't listening anymore. We're thinking about what we're going to say and how I'm going to empathize. But really, in this case, closing your mouth, receiving the burden, listening well, don't compare, and do not fix.
Right. Yeah, that whole listening well section, that and the tendencies that we have, all with really good intentions.
Yeah, good intentions.
To just, again, as I think the phrase that you frequently use is to hijack that, to take it away from them, which this needs to be about them. And so what listening well looks like, that section I thought was really fantastic. So sometimes we do say things, and sometimes we need to say things, and sometimes words can be really comforting, and sometimes they can not be comforting.
Right.
So, but you devote a whole chapter called Use Wise Words. So tell us more about that and how that using wise words is what you would call the fourth guideline. So
right. There's the moments as a tier 4 that you're going to have just a moment to say something, right? And you might not be in regular conversation with someone. So I think when we think ahead of what might I say, if we choose wisely what we're going to say, instead of just saying the first thing that comes out of our mouth when we stand there in a receiving line at a funeral, or when we see the person at church or in the grocery store or on the soccer sidelines or wherever we might run into them, or a family gathering, I think we need to be thoughtful. What can I say that would build them up or help them know? And I think that an expression of I'm with you. I want to be here for you. I'm sorry for the pain you're experiencing. That's sort of the more helpful thing to say, in the sense of they just need to know we're here. And no words are going to ever make it better in that moment. So we can't think we're going to have the perfect words. So we need to be thoughtful, because the first thing that comes out of our mouth is often not the best thing.
Really?
when I interviewed you for this book, if you remember, and we were sitting at a pool in Orlando at a work conference, and I asked you, what was helpful? What have you seen other people have done in your life and trial, and what was helpful and what wasn't? And your words are in the book, and I will forever quote you and thank you for it. But you said, just because it's true does not make it helpful.
Amen.
And if people leave this book or this webinar, this conversation with nothing more than that, I think we've done a service to our friends that are facing trial. Because what happens is we want to put like our own silver lining, our own good positive spin, our own, well, what about this? Or, we want to make it better. And the truth is, we aren't going to be able to make it better. I mean, just showing up makes it better because we're standing with them in it. And so choosing wise words, I mean, the not helpful things, yes, maybe they're in heaven and that is a good thing. But in that moment,
right,
the person wants that person with them. They want their baby in that room with them. They don't want to be without their baby. They don't want to be without their mom or their spouse or their child. I mean, none of it. They don't want that. And so in that moment, even though our faith says, and whatever they believe in the sense of, yes, they are saved, they're going to heaven, that is great, we should rejoice. But it's up to them, not us, to be saying how they should feel, to be putting sort of silver linings on their story. I had a friend who read this book, and he's pretty clinical. He's a doctor. And after he read it, he came to me when I was in his office one day. He said, I can't believe it. I had a friend who lost a son, and I sat across the table from him, and I started to say what I thought, what I had heard over my life were all these comforting sort of Christian words. And he said, and he got so mad at me, and it almost broke our friendship, because he couldn't believe that I was trying to tell him that it was okay. And so the things he said may have been true, but they were not helpful.
Right.
And he said, oh, how I wish I'd had this book a year ago, because what he really wanted from me in that moment was not for me to say anything. He wanted me to just be. Right. And if I was going to speak, to just say, I'm here. I'm here to listen. I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm sorry, this is terrible. We wear those wristbands that say cancer sucks or whatever. Just say that. That's fine. It's true. And it's kind of helpful.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think that because we talked about that a couple of years ago while this was ruminating around in your mind and starting to put ink to paper and I don't know if you ever heard the song by Jason Gray called Not Right Now. But it's all about grieving, and it would be right up your alley, and it's right in line with what we're talking about this moment, is that he's saying, yeah, someday it's going to be okay, and someday we can talk about how God redeemed it, and someday we can look at that. But kind of the analogy that he uses, but right now my house is burning down. And the smoke hasn't cleared yet. Yeah. I'm not ready to look to that. It's not that it's not true. It's just not right now. And that idea of just because it's true doesn't mean it's helpful, I think has been a huge thing. And I think the way that you handle that and unpack that in the book is fantastic. So the watching your words. So final guideline.
Let me just point out for a minute, Keith, a really subtle nuance in that. The other thing we can do is if they actually have found redemption or a beauty in the ashes or a moment for themselves, it is totally great to agree with them and come alongside them in that, right? So let them lead. If they are saying, can you believe this happened and God provided this beautiful blessing in the midst of this terrible situation, then yes, join them in that. We're not saying that we can't find the good. And I love how you pointed that out. I just really wanted to make sure we knew, yes, come alongside if they're saying it first, but please let them lead. Don't lead with your very first thing you thought of just because you want to make yourself and them try to make them feel better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that idea of when we say something, sometimes I've had times when I'm talking to somebody who's going through a hard time and they'll ask for a scripture.
Yeah.
Tell me one of God's promises. I need to hear something foundational. And absolutely, to share something in response to their need. But again, I think that this goes so much in line with the previous guideline, which is listening well
Mm-hmm.
and hearing what they need, not just what you want to say.
Right.
And, and that's huge. That's
And
huge.
there's a huge part of the book that sort of, is this overarching theme, which is basically it's not about you, meaning it's not about me, the one who's coming alongside. It's about the person in trial. And when we look at it with that lens, we are more likely to be able to follow their lead and put them first and not try to insert our helpful nature or our agenda or our great advice or our silver linings, whatever it might be. And so if we let them lead and we affirm whatever they are saying first, then we are really making it about them and not about us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the final guideline really pertains to when we're talking to somebody, when we have a friend who is going through a long haul type of deal, when they've been diagnosed with cancer, it's and they're going through chemo, and they know that it's not something where they're going to die in the next 2 weeks. It's something where they're going to be going through chemo and radiation, and they're about to enter into a battle that's going to be a year or more.
Right.
And there's unknowns, or a significant injury or surgery that's going to take months to recover. What's the guideline for that when somebody's got kind of a long haul type of challenge?
Yeah. It really, the bottom line is, especially in that long haul or chronic situation, you could call it,
Mm-hmm.
that we really need to be people that are trying to provide a normalcy in their life. So what I call it is nourishing normal. And we forget that their whole life is about this thing, their new
Mm-hmm.
reality. Everywhere they go, they cannot get away from it. And so if we realize that maybe we need to put our own agenda aside, like we just talked about. For example, I may really want to know what happened in the last treatment. I may really want to know the latest update because I care and because I'm curious and all those other reasons, right? But if every time we see them, we're digging and asking for information and wanting to go there and really just make it about their cancer or their diagnosis or their, hardship, whatever it might be long term, then we kind of rob them of the ability to be who they were before.
Mm-hmm.
And so we at all costs want to be nourishing normalcy. And I remember, my friends, my very best friend who walked through cancer for 5 years, her husband, had to do the whole life at the soccer fields and at the basketball fields and at church and all the places, and she couldn't be there. And so people would come to me and ask me, what do I do? And one of the things I remember telling a friend who was on the same team with them, she said, what do I say? And I said, talk about football. Talk about things that you talked about before. Because honestly, all he talks about is this. If you imagine that you're just one more person, that you might just be the iceberg that sinks the Titanic, right? I mean, it just takes that one last stone to break the wall down. And so there's this, we need to be mindful of the fact that it's not about us knowing the scoop or having them even not feel. This is sort of common. We don't want them to think we didn't think about them or ask, because wouldn't they just think we're just terrible if we didn't ask them? And that's really natural and normal. And again, not malintentioned at all. But if you imagine that you're the 100th person today that asked about it, especially in those big trials where they're very public and they're long, year, 2 years, 4 years, battling in and out.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to go to their kid's concert and watch their kid perform. They just want to go to the football game and sit on the bench and watch the kid and not have it be about cancer. They want to go to Target. They want to go to coffee. They want to go to movies. They want to do all the things that maybe they dreaded doing before, like us moms, we want to just do the laundry. It must be bad if we want to still do the laundry or go to Target, right? but that you're robbed of the normalcy the minute you get the news. And
Right.
our job, our gift to them is to just help promote normalcy. Keep inviting them. Don't make them feel like a piranha, like a pariah. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Piranha?
Probably not a piranha.
What's the right word? Don't make them feel ostracized even further by excluding them, right? Keep inviting. They can say no.
Right.
But how would you feel if you just never got invited anymore because everyone assumed you were too sick to come to that party? No. You could say simply, gosh, we'd love you to come if you're up to it, but no obligation. But we just really want you to know. We'd love to have you there.
Right.
Easy. Nourishing normal. So important for those people.
Good. Well, these guidelines, I want to go through them once more. But as a reminder to those people that are watching, if you've got a specific question now, we just kind of want to move into a time where you can ask, is there a specific situation? Is there a specific thing you're wondering whether you could say, whether you could do? What are the challenges that you've got that you want to chat about? And so feel free to post that. Again, you can just kind of go into that chat area and you can change the little chat bubble to a Q&A, and it'll ask it as a question, and we'll see that pop up and be able to do. So, but again, this whole thing is written down in all these guidelines and tons more are, in your book alongside, which I'm going to just go ahead and so that people can see it there. You can, I hope people can see it, but you can find out all about alongside if that's something that you want to grab there. And since it officially, you can find it on Amazon and read reviews and all that kind of stuff. But since it officially launches on Tuesday, I know you've got some, early order gifts there, and they can find out more about that there. But I wanted to make sure that I've got time to answer some questions if people have them. And
yeah, do you have the website somewhere, Keith? I don't see it on my screen, but
I think that it's just it's just sarahbeckman.com/alongside book. Is that right? Can you?
Or just www.alongsidebook.com will take them there.
Okay, alongsidebook.com. So if they click the learn more, that will take them to that link. So they can do that. So once again, just as we review the idea, the guidelines, the 5 guidelines we've looked at of relationship tiers, that the tier 1, real close person, tier 4, somebody who hears about a friend who maybe, and the tier 2 and 3 in between, just really recognizing what really is your responsibility in this. And
not called to help everyone.
Right, not called to help everyone. And then the specific offers versus kind of the triggering in your own mind. Anytime I find myself about to say, what can I do? You make the decision of what you can do and offer it. But that specific offers, and then listening well, combined with watching your words. So what does it really mean to listen and not hijack the conversation, but to truly carry a piece of their burden with your ears? And then the watching your words, that whole chapter. I mean, that's worth the price of admission right there for the use wise words chapter. And that idea of nourishing normal, that some, I loved what you said about that whole idea of when somebody has a long haul situation, the last thing I want to do is talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
And have you just simply invited somebody to a movie or invited them over for dinner? And I think the freedom of saying, okay, they can say no, and I'm choosing ahead of time to not be offended, even if they've said no the last 12 times. I'm gonna anyhow. So Kay asked this, Sarah. Kay said, a friend just told me he lost his sight in one eye and it's irreversible. I know there's a mourning process for this too, but does this kind of struggle fit the same parameters? Do you have specific tips for this kind of loss when somebody's lost sight in one eye and it's irreversible?
Yeah. I mean, same kind of trial. It's a health trial. It's long-term. They're adjusting to a new normal. One of the things we talk about also in sort of that listening well is a way to be a good listener is to ask open-ended questions. And if you ask a question that's open-ended, to that person, like, how are you adjusting? How are you feeling? I'm sure how is this new normal for you?
Mm-hmm.
What are your current struggles? Or even from a parameter of faith, saying, I'm sure that this is a hard new reality for you. What could I be praying for you specifically?
Yeah.
So it isn't any different than any other kind of struggle. There's going to be practical things that they may need help with. So if you are mindful of thinking, wow, what might I offer that would be a blessing that I have to offer,
right,
that could just bless them in this trial. It might not be the same as having to go to chemo and radiation and being in a trial of cancer for a year where it's just really ongoingly acute and you're sick and sick and sick and sicker, but it's still the same. They have a new reality, and our job is to love them well in the midst of that reality. And so I think the book would offer great long-term guidelines. That every chapter is filled with actions that you can take. But I think that it is the same, and open-ended questions are a great way to encourage listening well, because if they don't want to go there, then they won't. And you kind of open the door and said, I'm safe and I'll listen if you want, but you don't push it. You just are there and you kind of let it out there, and and it looks like Sally has, maybe kind of a similar question about her friend. It's in the chat and not a queue.
Oh, I see.
I think that what you're saying, Sally, is that you're not sure if you should ask. And there's something very unique about the onset of a trial, the initial part, that we do need to acknowledge it in some way, because that part is really lonely and isolating when you're sort of dealing with, I just got this news and I don't even know what end is up. We do need to acknowledge the trial, and then we just let them talk about it if they want. So what I would say is something more of the lines of, I'm here for you. I'm praying for you and your results. I'd love to be a sounding board if you feel like you need to talk.
Yeah.
So that's a specific offer of being a listener. And that way, if she doesn't want to talk about the results, she doesn't have to. But you have basically offered to be a listener if she wants it. And then she can say, yes, I just got the results. Or you could say, as you're facing this new reality, would you like me to start a meal program for your family? Would that be helpful? There's lots of very specific ways you can say, and kind of, yeah. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also a little bit in what Kay was just talking, when somebody's got something physical that isn't completely incapacitating, but it's definitely changing what they can and can't do. Sometimes there are specific offers that to make. And sometimes some of those open-ended questions can actually lead to determining what those specific offers, like to be able to ask somebody, what do you find yourself struggling with right now? What do you find that you used to do easily that is hard now? And that may churn in your own mind.
They might say, I can't get through the grocery store. I don't, or I can't find time to make dinner or get the laundry done. Then you could say, if it works for you, you could say that. I could help, or I can find someone to help.
So here's a tough one that Barbie just asked. This unfortunately is becoming too common. But my friend, our sons were best friends. Lost her son to suicide last year. Also lost her mother and a brother. I try to keep things normal, but still want to know what she might need so I can just do it. I mean, the guideline the guideline that comes to my mind in a situation like that is, make listen well the first 4 guidelines and then add the rest, because when somebody is going through that, not just that depth of challenge, but the quantity of depth of challenge, right? To lose 3 people in the span of, it sounds like, a year. There will be times when what they need, what listening looks like, is sitting in silence.
Yeah.
And so Barbie, if you're somebody who is prone to being a doer, which, since you actually put in quotes, just do it.
Right.
I'm guessing that you are. You may need to categorize in your own brain that silence and listening need to be the doing sometimes.
Yeah, they're a valuable something you can do. And gosh, Barbie, I'm sorry that, this is a hard spot for you to walk alongside a friend in this, that when it's just trial compounded on trial, it just is a whole different animal. It sounds like you're probably a tier 1, maybe a tier 2. It's the kids are best friends. I'm not sure if you were a tier 1 or tier 2 with this friend, but when I walked through cancer with my best friend for 5 years, there was many, 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 many days we just didn't even talk about it. We just didn't go there. Tier 2. Okay. So, one thing you might ask is, do you have someone to talk to? If you need someone, I would love to be I would love to be there for you. I'd love to take you to coffee if you feel like this burden is heavy and you want to have someone else carry it with you. But as a tier 2, you can just sort of try and identify needs that if you were in that situation that you might want. One of my favorite pieces of advice, and this was beautiful, many people shared this with me, but the people that continue to remember. So the mom and the dad are gone, now the brother, now the son. If you continue to remember long after the trial is over, long after the hot dishes are cleared, so to speak, then you are really honoring that friend and remembering with her the loss she's faced. And it doesn't have to be anything big and giant. It could just be something where you set a reminder on your phone to mail her a card once a month. And it could be 1 month really a funny card, and 1 month just I'm thinking of you, prayed this for you today, put a scripture in, whatever. Just that continuing to remember is so valuable to people, because the rest of the world wants you to move right on with your grief. And I want you to be better and fixed so that I can just feel like I'm done and this is over and I can move on. But they aren't moving on. It's long and hard. My sister lost her husband. It's been 4 years, and her son just got married this fall. And she sent me a message as heartbreaking, but saying, I'm just feeling so lonely. And everyone's busy and it's been all this time, but here it is, my kid's getting married and I'm just feeling really lonely. Would you pray for me? And I was so glad she reached out. I felt a little bad that I hadn't, thought of it kind of before she said it. But we had the type of relationship where I'd come alongside in other ways, so she knew I was safe. But that continue to remember, just like I said, set an alarm on your phone every 3 months, even. Whatever it is, those people that continue to say, I'm thinking of you, and not just at those hard, big, giant, monumental occasions, but the everyday. That's something really valuable you can do.
Yeah, definitely. Good. Well, man, thanks so much for taking the time to join us, Sarah. And this book is going to help a ton of people. I'm so grateful that you wrote down all the things that you had learned and thought of and walked through, and provided this resource that is as encouraging and inspiring as it is practical. So well done. And so everybody else, thanks for joining us. And if you want to share this with anybody as well, you can just go over to keithferrin.com, and I will have this on there as well. And just search, just search on, along the word alongside or Sarah Beckman, and it'll pop up there. So thanks so much. Have a great one.
Thanks for the opportunity, Keith. It was really great. I'm so glad for everyone that came and listened. Appreciate the audience so much.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.